Hello and welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul and Justin Baker in studio. We're all blessed to have you here, Justin.
Oh, thanks, Mark.
Yeah, no problem. On today's show, we are going to be talking about the final leg of the regular season and the teams and the players that we are most going to be intentionally watching as this goes on. Obviously, there's some teams that have fallen way off the map in terms of watchability because their games are meaningless and there's not a whole lot to look forward to, at least in terms of this season. So unless you're a fan of that team, probably not going to be in your watch list. Some playoff battles, some potential playoff matchups, and some really good teams. So we're going to both give our top 5 teams that we are going to keep an eye on, and then we'll shift and we'll do players that are, for one reason or another, we're trying to watch them. So some of those players could cross over with their teams. Justin, was there a particular rhyme or reason for why you picked certain guys or teams?
Well, guys for sure, because I think they're
had a hard time
good
picking
looking.
The girls. All the girls in the NHL.
Ooh, ouch. You know what?
That wasn't an insult on women.
Was it though?
No. I mean, the one skated fast at the
All-Star game?
the skills and beat one guy. Who was the guy they beat?
I don't remember, to be quite honest.
It's funny, but it's it's cool. I think that there's women that are more talented than men at maybe one particular skill. Certainly, it's just a matter of having all those skills together is why you don't see a woman playing in the NHL. But
yeah,
and I just feel like
we could dive into this one for a while,
but maybe not anymore. If you're fast enough, maybe you can get around guys. I mean, a woman, I can't remember her name. Sorry, but she can move around pretty quick. If you can move around like Johnny Gaudreau, you're never going to get hit. So, also, would anybody hit her? I don't know.
That's true. I think the way the rules are, I think they're set up to where you don't have to really be physically.
I know Raffi Torres
anymore.
would definitely hit her.
Mr. Gudis probably would too.
Yeah, Radko. Okay. Certainly Radko would. I'll ask him later.
Yeah, please do.
So, with that said, let's start with your number 5. What team are you watching 5th most down the stretch?
Ooh, you know what? I didn't even think to put these teams in order. So
okay, that's fine. Yeah,
no.
Fine.
I'm gonna do it right now, just on the fly. So
on the fly.
Number 5 for me, the Detroit Red Wings. And
okay.
I say
they had to be on your list.
Yeah, and I don't think it's because they're the hometown team, and right, I'm going to watch their games because they're just so easily accessible, but because they're only a few points out of last place to keep the Avs from having the top percentage chance of getting Hughes. And Mike Green gone for the regular season. Dylan Larkin's going to be out tonight. He's got some back problems. Personally, I would love to see them get Jack Hughes, and so again, that lose for Hughes thing, I'm kind of like, yes, okay, keep Dylan Larkin out because he's been fantastic, and play Bernier, whatever it takes to lose at this point.
Who gave Mike Green that STD that put him out the rest of the year?
STD at the
all we
liver.
know is that it was a virus, right? That's all they're saying.
In his liver. Yeah.
Well, so, could still be an STD. I wasn't sure at first if it was like a HOSA thing. HOSA, they said he was out with a virus at first, and then it was his like skin thing or something.
Yeah.
You have any other reasons to watch the Red Wings? Because for me, I'm going to say that they're at about 30 or 29 on my list.
Okay. No, it's basically
pretty far
just to watch them to lose, but then also for me, I love, because they are my team, I like watching the younger guys that are coming up to watch them play and see how they do in the future of the Wings. So, is
there a particular? Maybe we'll get to a player.
No.
Okay.
I don't got any Wings on my top 5 players. But
Zadina scored his first NHL goal, and it was a beauty. A rocket over the corner. It was against the Avs, right? So
went 5-hole on that one. It was nice.
Oh, was it 5-hole? Okay.
I think it was.
I'm thinking of a different goal, but anyway, I mean, that's a nice thing. I'm glad that they brought him up for just a PR standpoint and I know the Leafs, when they were doing really poorly, they brought up William Nylander at the end of the year.
Oh, right.
And he played. It was about this time when he played, and it was very encouraging as you thought, okay, here's a guy that will be really good, and he can kind of get rid of some of those bumps along the way. The maturing process can start a little bit earlier. And I think that's important. So in that sense, is something to watch for. I guess if a game happens to be on, I'll look forward to watching Zadina. For me, I'm going. My number 5 is the Columbus Blue Jackets, partially because, of course, they're right on that bubble of the playoffs, which I don't know how with all the moves they made, but this team, I'm having a real hard time not being that guy who's like, I'm just rooting for them to miss because they bet all their chips on everything, and if they miss, it would be funny. At the same time, I am a human, and I can understand that there are human beings that made the decisions that they did, and they'll probably get fired if they miss the playoffs.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I'm rooting for them, but at the same time, I'm not, and so I'm torn. Which is why they're my number 5, because I think I'll watch, like I will go out of my way to watch some of their games, particularly, they play a team that's just ahead of them in the standings, like Montreal or Pittsburgh. I haven't looked at their schedule. I don't know if they have games against them, but I imagine that they do, being at least Pittsburgh's a divisional opponent. So I will be watching them, and I want Duchesne, Panarin. I want some combination to just take off here at the end, and so I'm waiting for that. So we'll maybe get more into that as we hit the players. But the Columbus Blue Jackets are my number 4 or 5.
Well, they're my number 4.
Okay,
just because I figured too, it's a good segue. They're an interesting team for me because it is Tortswat's 2019 basically. Is he going to survive the season or the off season if they don't make the playoffs? Right. To the schedule point, they actually tonight play the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Well, there you go.
In Pittsburgh. So
yes, I have a game to watch.
Yeah. They got them, and they also got to play Carolina next week. Then a little further down the schedule, they got Montreal, Boston a couple times here over the stretch. So they've got some tough games, a lot of playoff teams. Nashville Islanders a couple times. So good luck.
Yeah.
Although they do finish the season off playing the Senators, so that might be a saving grace if they're like a point away.
The very last game. Although that would be the game that the Senators go, we're going to play the game of our freaking life just to keep these bastards out of the playoffs.
Stick it to Duchesne and to Zingle.
Yeah, yes. The actual. Oh, I didn't even think of that. That's fantastic. That would be really fun. Well, my number 4, I'm gonna go over to the Western Conference to a team that I haven't been into all year, but I watched them play the Nashville Predators the other night, and the game was great. I really enjoyed it, and I thought there was a lot happening, and it looks like the Minnesota Wild are starting to find themselves a little more. I really like the way Kevin Fiala's fitting into that lineup. I think he scored 2 goals the other night.
Yeah, Donato is playing pretty hot too.
And so I think that this switch up of their team, I mean, even though Rask hasn't really worked out, Victor Rask, not Tuukka, that Victor Rask hasn't worked out, and that Niederreiter's playing okay in Carolina, of course, we know that. I think that this team just needed a switch up. I mean, you think it's Niederreiter out and Granlund out, and in come these fresh faces from other teams, and I think that it has been a good switch for the Minnesota Wild. And the way that the Colorado Avalanche, just outside that top line, they can't seem to produce anything. And so I think that Minnesota has the depth to make the playoffs, even though we've been saying this whole time, like they're done. They're like, you see them slowly falling through the standings. Well, they're starting to find their stride again. And I'm very interested to see what this team could do, because I mean, Dallas is right in front of them. And if they can jump Dallas, I mean, a Minnesota, Minnesota Calgary or a Minnesota Winnipeg first round would be interesting. I mean, I like, that Winnipeg Minnesota for playoff matchup is a good one because they're really close together in proximity. We don't really think of it that way, but I think that Winnipeg is actually the closest team to Minnesota, if I'm not mistaken. Or Minnesota is the closest team to Winnipeg. Maybe that's how it is. Chicago is probably closer. Maybe.
To Winnipeg?
To Winnipeg, is it?
Or
no, to Minnesota.
Oh, no, it's Winnipeg.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. I'll have to do some geography lessons later. Who is your number 3?
Number 3, I'm going to the West as well. The Arizona Coyotes. Yes.
Honestly, not one that I thought we would be real high on towards the end of the year. They just missed my list. I can't ever seem to watch their games. I don't know why.
Well, I mean, for one, it's on the West Coast, right? So that automatically
but I
makes
like
it a little
watching
harder.
late night hockey.
That's true. You do. A lot more than I
usually
do.
am just more likely to flip on the Flames or
That's true. Yeah, they don't have like marquee players, guys that you want to watch play hockey games, right? But I think for me, it's the can they push? They're 3 points out of a playoff spot right now, and the amount of man games. I think right now the count is over 350 man games lost at this point. Yeah. So they're at the top of the NHL.
Not to mention that I think that every game that your goalie's injured, it should count as 2 because there's only one goal. Like, really, I mean, there's, of course, the Tampa Bay Lightning, I think they just set a record. No team's ever had 2 goalies win 10 games in a row in the same season.
Oh, yeah.
Louis Domingue and Vasilevsky both did that. So, of course, there's exceptions, but most teams, their backup goalie is a shell of their starting goaltender. Unless your starting goaltender isn't great, in which case, maybe they're closer together. But, you look at Antti Ranta compared to anyone else on that team at least in a situation where you go, who do I want? Antti Ranta or anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, when I look at this team and the injury bug, like Darcy Kepner, fantastic, right? But if you look at their forward position, you can point right to Derek Stepan and say, okay, what other team in the NHL that has one decent center, right? Even though he really shouldn't be a top line center.
Didn't Brad Richardson have 4 goals the other night?
Yeah, he is playing. I mean, he's playing freaking hot right now. But I guess what I mean is like he's not a guy you would typically think of as being a top 6 center, right?
Sure.
Or at least maybe to start this season. So.
I wouldn't think of him as a top 9 center.
Okay, there you go. So anyways, like, for instance, you take Ottawa before they got rid of Duchesne, right? If they had lost Duchesne at any point throughout the season, like that team would just fall apart.
Right, more than they already are.
Right, I guess. So, or the Red Wings without Dylan Larkin, right? I mean, they're garbage at that point. So
there certainly is even if your team loses more often than they win, and you consider yourself maybe you're in the bottom 4th of the league like the Red Wings are, it can always get worse.
It can.
Those. I mean, even though your team might be the worst in the league, the Red Wings are watchable. I won't say that they're unwatchable. I remember when the Leafs were purposefully tanking, and my God, who was it that was on their top line? Guy was P.A. Parento.
Oh, I remember him.
Holy
yes.
crap. He was in their top line. He was on their number 1 power play.
I remember when he scored 30 in the Island.
Yes.
That guy actually had a moment.
He had a decent year with the Leafs that year, but of course they were terrible. They didn't have, like, Leo Komarov was legitimately their top right winger on that team until Nylander came in at the end of the year. I mean, they just weren't good. Even though those players, they got their numbers, they got over 20 goals each because they're playing so often. And they're, if you're given enough opportunity and you're an NHL caliber player, you're going to score eventually. But it's just not watchable. So it can always get worse. I mean, Senators fans are seeing that right now. It can you can always lose your players. There's other players underneath the ones that you have in the depth, in the organization depth chart. It's just some of those players, you pray to God that they stay in the East Coast Hockey League.
Right. Who would have thought Chris Tierney would be your best center? Anyways, so you're number 3.
Your best center and winger. My number 3, I went back and forth on this. This is where I'm going to drop the Toronto Maple Leafs in. But I'm actually going to combo. I'm just going to go Leafs/Bruins.
Ooh.
Because I really like this race. I mean, right now the Bruins have, I think they're they've gone 21 games or something without a regulation loss.
It's sick.
And yet they have not gained a point on the Tampa Bay Lightning over that stretch. It's first off, it shows you how silly some of the overtime loss stuff is. But at the same time, Tampa Bay is unreal. Boston looks like they're practically unbeatable too. And all the while, the Leafs have actually managed to maintain pace with them, just 2 points back. So it'll be, I think that home ice is crucial, maybe in that series more than any other one, simply because the Bruins have played the Leafs 2 other times in the playoffs in the last 5 years and played them last year, and the home ice did come into play for sure. And so I'm keeping an eye on that race because I think that not necessarily whoever gets home ice is going to win the series because the Leafs are going to win that series, but it'll
I love your optimism.
It'll be a good race to the end, and it'll be. I mean, shoot, if the Bruins can continue this pace and they can come into the playoffs having barely lost a regulation game in the last 3 months of the season, that's an interesting way to enter the playoffs. We've seen some teams enter the playoffs really hot and cool off quickly, and we've also seen teams enter in hot and keep on running through because they just found their mojo. So I'm looking forward to both those teams and the little battle there.
Okay, well, that's why number one for me is the Maple Leafs because of those.
Okay,
that playoff battle,
and they're just fun to watch.
And they are fun to watch because they can score 6 goals a night if they want to, like no problem.
Except for they can't.
Except for
lately.
Yeah. Well, anyways, yeah. And speaking of running and hot, right? So I was actually thinking on the way over here. I'm like, okay, I went undefeated in fantasy hockey this year, 20-0, and
unreal.
Yeah. I think, like, okay, I got the bye the first round. I'm like, I'm gonna lose in the second round just because I was so hot in the regular season. It's gonna bite me real quick, and then I'm gonna be the laughing stock of the league when I don't even place in the top 3.
Yeah.
So, all right, number 2 for me, I'm gonna stick in the West, but it's the Winnipeg Jets, and it does have to do with the playoff battle again because I do think having that opportunity to not play St. Louis or maybe even Dallas, depending on how things shake out, right? I don't want to be, playing that number 2-3 playoff spot, and so I think for Winnipeg getting the number 1 seed and having to play, maybe Minnesota or Arizona, depending on who, would just be easier for them. And they've been kind of slumping lately, and so I want to see them kind of kick it up a little bit because they're probably my favorite out of the West just because I love Blake Wheeler. I want to see these guys win.
And you've been Connor Hellebuck's biggest fan for
yes, I have.
A long time. Like, I remember before when he was in the American Hockey League, you were pumping this guy's tires. What did I say? I said my number 3 was the
You're
Leafs.
on 2 now.
I'm on 2, yeah. Again, it's really hard for me to pick between these teams. I'm gonna say the Carolina Penguin Habs.
Well, Carolina made my just missed.
Okay,
so.
Yeah. Like thing with Carolina and watching them is just generally if there's a Leafs game, Leafs are the team that I'm going to watch. So the Eastern Conference teams can be a little harder to watch at times because I'm watching another game. But Carolina is very interesting to me. Because, of course, they've been on this crazy run. I mean, they could jump the Islanders, the pace that they're at. And the Islanders are starting to just notch back down a little bit. I think that they'll probably still end up being in that 2 spot. Good on the Capitals to really... They're just on fire. And 8-2 in their last 10. So I'm interested to see how this Carolina Hurricanes end of the season goes. Because I think a few things could happen. I think... any one of these teams, the Canadians, the Penguins, the Hurricanes, the Blue Jackets, any one of them could go on a nice little winning streak. It could also, one of them is likely, I think, to go on a little bit of a downward spiral, Columbus. And so, this race is so fascinating to me because it's really Carolina. Nobody was really thinking that they would be here. Maybe they'd be on the bubble. I guess this is about where we thought they would be. kind of on the bubble. I think they're further in the playoffs than I thought they might be. I thought they might be right now like 4 or 5 points out. And that team that looks like they could make a run, but they probably won't get in there. And they managed to do it. They're in there right now. They're in that division. But if Pittsburgh misses, if Columbus misses, it's going to be. It's definitely unexpected. Whereas the Canadians and the Hurricanes, this is gold right now for them. This is bonus money. So that whole race entices me. I'm not sure which team to watch more.
Yeah, I did like the Hurricanes having hit my just miss just because Peter Mrazek trying to earn a contract, right? To say, hey, because their goaltending's been playing pretty good, McElhinney and Mrazek, and so you're giving Carolina something to think about. Like, oh, hey, do we still want to maybe give Darling another shot next year? Or do we want to maybe go with these two guys again because they've been playing so good for us. Even though beginning of the season, McElhinney was good but injured, and Mrazek was playing mediocre at best. And then all of a sudden they've gotten hot. They've been one of the best defensive teams it seems in the league lately. So
there you go. Who's your number one?
Well, I told you
said it was
Toronto.
the Leafs. Did you have a 2?
Yeah, my number 2 was Winnipeg.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
my numbers are off. I'm having trouble counting today. My number 1 is actually the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I'll tell you why.
Ooh.
Tampa Bay Lightning, if we spin over to our standings, they've got 51 wins with 15 games left to go. Now, as you remember, the record for most wins in a season is your Red Wings with 62.
I remember
back
that
in 1996.
It didn't work out for them in the playoffs.
The 95-96 season. No, it didn't work out in the playoffs. They lost to a very interesting Avalanche team after Claude Lemieux plastered Chris Draper's face all over the boards in a very negative way. I don't say that was. It's one of the nastiest things I've ever seen. And I think that injury, I don't know, it just soured everything in that series, and I think that was some of the reason why. I mean, imagine if that happened now. Claude Lemieux out the rest of the playoffs.
Oh, absolutely. He'd get suspended for...
Gone.
Yeah. One of the best quotes I ever heard in sound bites was, "I can't believe I shook that guy's freaking hand," just after Dino Cincerelli afterwards. And
yes,
I love it.
Because that was Dino's last year as a Red Wing.
I think
he never won a cup as a Red Wing.
No. You're right.
Tear. The Lightning, 15 games left. They need to win 13 of them to beat that record, or 12 of them to beat that record.
Yeah, the way they're playing, it's doable.
It's very possible
and very scary.
And I mean, even just to break 60 wins, they have to go 9-6 the rest of the way to break 60 wins. I mean, that's incredible.
That really is. Let me ask you this though, and especially because a league that's supposed to be so balanced, the way they're dominating, right, is mind-boggling to begin with. But everybody's pretty much penciled in Barry Trotz as the Jack Adams winner. But if they set the win record, do you give it to John Cooper now?
I don't think he cares about anything but the cup.
I don't think he does either. But I mean,
I would tell him, don't give it to me unless I win the cup.
Okay, there you go.
I mean, shoot, yeah. On the one hand, the original 60 win record to me is the most legitimate because there was no overtime.
Well, yeah.
So they played 60 minutes and that's it, and they won 60 games just outright. Now the Red Wings, they tied. I think they tied 6 games or 8 games that year or something. I think they lose? They lost 8 games in regulation that year. I think they were 62, 8 and 12 or something maybe. Or maybe they were, I don't know. Do you know the one team that beat them twice that year?
Mm-mm.
The Leafs.
Of course.
The Leafs didn't even make the playoffs.
Didn't even make the playoffs. Stop it.
And they beat the 62 win team. Yeah, you can pull up that. I think I'm going with 62, 8 and 12. So the Red Wings, yeah, they got overtime, but the Lightning have at least. I mean, I guess there's the fact that they can go to a shootout, and they have gone to a shootout 7 times and won 6 of them. So 6 of their wins are in a shootout. If this was 1995, those are 6 ties. And in reality, they're at 45 wins right now, and they wouldn't be able to touch the record. So the stats have definitely tipped in their favor to be able to do it, but it still is insane, especially since there was no salary cap at that time, and that Wings team was stacked. So, okay, are you looking up their record? Have you found it yet?
I'm looking up some of the records. So I'm looking at the Canadian 76-77 record for most points in a season, 132, and. Funny, ironically enough, the Red Wings just had a horrible record. They were 16-55-9 that season.
Wow, 55 losses.
Just terrible.
Unreal.
In the same division, too. That's probably why they lost.
Yes, they probably lost every time by a score of 8-1. Okay, well, should we move on to our players?
Let's go.
We're watching for? Okay. Well, I'll start with my number 5.
Please.
My number 5 is Mitch Marner. Because I want to see what is he going to do the rest of the year. We know Brad Marchand, he tweeted out, he deserves $12 million. I tend to think that was a hey, if he gets $12 million, we can really screw over the Leafs. And then I don't know if $12 million is there's no winger paid $12 million. The highest paid winger in the league is Patrick Kane at 10.5. I don't think Marner's quite there yet because Marner hasn't led the league in points. The fact that his points are obviously inflated because everyone's is inflated, and so we can't base this off of the previous years. We have to base it off of everyone else. He is doing very well in terms of everyone else, though, too. But I think depending on what he can do the rest of this season, the regular season, if he goes on another nice little tear, I mean, I think in the last 8 periods, he had a point in the Vancouver game last night, and he had 7 points in 8 periods. That's pretty good.
Yeah, not too shabby.
So it's if he can continue doing something like this, if Mitchell Marner ends up with 100+ points, something that I don't think we expected him to be up at that level, even with point totals being what they are. If here in the last 20 games he ends up, what would he needs another 18 points. So not out of the realm of possibility for Marner to have 100 points. As opposed to maybe the other way, if he cools down a little bit, ends up with around 90, which we can go, okay, well, that's inflated by 8 or 9 points. So you're an 80-point guy, which is still fantastic. But whatever he does the rest of this regular season could have an impact on his contract, which, as a Leafs fan, certainly matters to me. So I'll be watching Mitch Marner.
Yeah, I like that pick, and for me, when
he's fun to watch.
Well, yeah, he absolutely is, and there's some people that actually say he stirs that offense a lot more than Matthews does.
Well, there's a lot of talk out there about him winning the Selke.
Ooh. I like that.
Defensively, he's fantastic.
Yeah, he is very good.
Babcock's saying he's so good defensively because he's smarter than everybody else on the ice. That's what he said, I think. So
I love it. Now, this is something I heard a while back, and I would love to see one, but I kind of still think they're like the Easter Bunny at this point since the salary cap era, really. Offer sheet. Does anybody try to offer sheet Marner?
I think the Leafs will match whatever somebody offer sheet. I think they'll get something done by whether the Leafs win the cup or they're knocked out at some point. I think that the deal will get done quickly after that. I don't think they're going to let this one go to July 1st.
I agree. So perfect. Well, my number 5 is Mark Stone.
Trying to see how he does in Vegas. Huh?
I'm very excited because he, you and I have talked about the talent of unrestricted free agents coming up this offseason, and I think you've said on multiple occasions that he is probably the best one out there. And I've heard before, too, people say, I would rather have Stone than Panarin at this point, and which is very interesting if you really think about it. But, whatever your opinion is on him.
Both different types of players,
right.
Certainly.
Whatever your opinion is on him, he's still a fantastic winger. Man, you know what? I heard the other day that George McPhee, the only reason they didn't get the extension out when they could have on Friday last week was because he was out of town. He wanted to be there to sign it in person or something like that. And so that's why we haven't heard anything yet. But 2 points in 5 games played right now with Vegas, which isn't really that encouraging. But again, people need time to get acclimated.
Give him a second.
Right,
Hopefully
exactly.
It doesn't take him as long as it took William Nylander when he was coming back to a system he's played in for 3 years.
Sure, yeah.
Whereas Mark Stone hasn't played in this system at all. But
right, now you have, Paul Stastny and Pacioretty playing on your line. So pretty dang good line mates. So hopefully they get that figured out quick because that's going to be a tear of a line to see for a long time. So interested to see how he develops in that team because come playoff time, they'll be a fun team to watch.
All right. My number 4, I'm going old school, new school. I'm going Sidney Crosby here. Has clawed his way up through the point totals, but also his team's on the verge of being eliminated, and he has done everything.
I think the last 15 games he's averaging 2 points a game or something like that.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
He's got 92 points now at this point. I think he's just behind. He's got an 86. I'm sorry. So he's 6 points behind Connor McDavid, but he's really come from having what we would deem an average Sidney Crosby season to holy crap, he was probably going to have 100 points.
Even though it was still a point per game, he was still going. But,
right.
You know, it's funny to say that, that's pretty average for Crosby.
Yeah. So, the fact that not only is he in this I mean, no one's catching Kucherov. I just don't see it the way that they're rolling. But just the fact that he's hot, and his team needs to make the playoffs here. You know, he has done everything that he personally can do to keep his team afloat, because this team is sinking. Like, can you imagine this team without Crosby? I mean, forget Malkin. You know, this team without Crosby is in dire straits.
They're not in the playoffs.
No, not at all.
Mediocre goaltending. Yeah, Malkin's been playing. He's been playing fine, but like, he's not going to push this team up to where they need to be, right? And same with Phil Kessel. He's been playing fine, but not gonna get this team in the playoffs the way other guys are playing. So. Yep.
All right. Who's your number 4?
Number 4, I'm going goaltender.
I knew you would eventually.
I got 2 goalies on this list.
Okay.
So my first one is Martin Jones. And I say that because San Jose looks like they're going to secure a playoff spot, but I want to see him get hot down the stretch here because I love the San Jose Sharks. I want to see Thornton win a cup. It would be nice to see them push, to play Winnipeg in the West and maybe make it to the Stanley Cup Finals, and then maybe you can convince Erik Karlsson at that point to say, "Hey, stick around."
Yeah, ironic. Last year, I think San Jose led the league in goals against, if I'm not mistaken.
Did they? I think they were down there. Yeah, they were down there. I know that.
This year, there is only one team in the playoffs in both conferences with more goals against, and that's the Washington Capitals at 211. Wow. So the San Jose Sharks will have allowed 206 goals.
Yeah, Martin Jones.
They also have scored the most out of any playoff team in the West.
That doesn't hurt.
There's a few teams in the East that have.
Martin Jones, 31 wins, and he doesn't even have a .900 save percentage. .897.
Crazy.
Last 5 games, .903. So not going well for him.
Yeah. I mean, and you got to think come playoff time, those goals, you're not going to score as many goals in the playoffs. And so your goaltender better be ready to roll because, he's got, there's still time. It's not that there hasn't been goalies in the past. Let's go Washington Capitals. I mean, think about how much problems Braden Holtby had last year. People were talking about him, is he all done? Like, is he a starting goaltender in this league anymore? And he was benched during the season. And ultimately, Philip Grubauer started the first 2 games of that series. And Washington lost both those games. And then in comes Braden Holtby. And Ovechkin won the MVP of the playoffs. But I think Holtby would have been right behind him.
Oh, sure. It reminds me of the last time the Wings won the Cup when Hasek started, and then they brought in Osgood after a couple games, and he just tore it up. Yeah. And then Zetterberg ended up winning the Conn Smythe, which I'm like, okay, that probably could have been Osgood's, but you're okay with either one at this point. But the difference with San Jose is they're not going to Aaron Dell because he's been playing even worse. So, yeah, you're not giving him the starter's net to begin the playoffs.
It's funny because as a kid, I remember it was like Patrick Waugh won the Conn Smythe a couple
3 times.
3. Twice with Montreal and
twice
once with Colorado, because Colorado in '96 was Claude Lemieux.
Oh yeah, you're right.
And Claude Lemieux also won it in '95 with the Devils.
Mm-hmm.
So you had them. '97, you had Mike Vernon winning the Conn Smythe.
Yes.
Yeah, it was '97 because '98 was Yzerman,
and then 2002 was Lindstrom. So
8 was Lidstrom, right? Oh no,
it was 02.
You're right.
8 was Zetterberg when he took it from us.
But there was several times where goalies won. I mean, even Jaguar in a losing effort wins the Conn Smythe.
Oh, yes.
But lately there has just been a string of forwards, or I don't. Did Duncan Keith win it once?
He did.
He won it once. Yeah. So, but mostly forwards. Whereas for a while we were seeing quite a few goaltenders, and I wonder if just the idea of a goalie winning it is just kind of not as interesting or something.
Well, it's funny. When I look at they look at the marquee name, right? Ovi plays great, right? He's probably deserved to win an MVP award for a long time in the playoffs. He's always put the team on his back, but they just always come up short, And
Jonathan Quick and Tim Thomas won it back-to-back 11 and 12.
Yeah, those years they were just stellar, though. I mean, they played otherworldly. I think they had 930 plus save percentages each. So, yeah, I think unless you're hitting those very fantastic numbers, it's going to be hard to take it from a player.
I lied. Joe Sakic won the Conn Smythe in '96.
Did he?
And Patrick Waugh won it in 01.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
Claude Lemieux won it in '95, but that was his only one.
Got it. I was going to say, okay.
But he won 2 Stanley Cups in a row. We'll see.
He did.
2 different teams. Anyways, my number 3 is Alexander Ovechkin. I'm fascinated by his run at 60. I don't know if it's going to happen anymore. He's kind of cooled off in terms of scoring lumps of goals, but we know, I could say that, and then he'll get 2 hat tricks in a row, and suddenly he's at 52. And I mean, he's got 20 games or 18 games left, something like that, and you're looking at 16 games left. He would need 14 goals over that span. Which is that's tough to do. That would be tough to do. But getting 50 is certainly, that's almost a certainty for him. And so just seeing if he can get 60, I'm still intrigued. 60 goals is obviously a hard number to get to, even though guys are scoring over, like by the end of the season, a lot more players than what we're used to will have 100 points. That 60 goals is still so freaking hard to do.
Yeah, he is going to be pushing, though, to keep Washington in that top spot because they're only 6 points back of teams like, Pittsburgh jumping them, Columbus. So
yeah, but at this point, 6 points is a lot of points.
When you have 4-point games, sure.
What do we say? It was since for like the last 15 years, one team has made the playoffs being behind 6 points or more. And so that would also go to say, hey, you're probably not going to fall too far in the standings. But yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, they definitely want home ice advantage. I mean, although do you? Because you get maybe to play the Islanders or the Hurricanes instead of the Penguins in the first round.
Well, that's a good point, actually.
That's the problem, is that it's almost not a reward other than the fact that you get home ice. I mean, I think at this point, though, if I'm Washington, after last year beating the Penguins, I go, yeah, no, we'll beat them again.
It's not a mental problem anymore.
It'll be fine.
Sure.
Yeah. But just, there's something about, okay, they beat us last year. We can get them this time. Let's make those adjustments. I don't know. I'm not that scared of Pittsburgh. If I'm, frankly, any team in the NHL in that first round, I'm thinking I could beat Pittsburgh in the playoffs.
Okay.
Pittsburgh gets a little loose in the playoffs, especially that first round. Do you remember, was it 2 years ago against the Flyers, and those games, like there was that one game that was 7-6 or something like that in the first couple games. It's crazy. So the Pittsburgh Penguins do open it up sometimes in the playoffs.
Well, I even think this year, with as bad as the goaltending's been, they wouldn't be scaring me too much right now.
I mean, Washington's had worse.
They have. They actually
defensively speaking, they've been worse, but they score so many goals, it doesn't matter.
This is true. No yawning.
Excuse me.
All right.
You're number 2.
My number 3, actually. Yeah. One of your hometown boys, Mr. Morgan Riley.
For the Norries.
I am interested to see if he can pull it apart. Or not pull it apart.
Pull it apart. Here's the Norris Trophy, Morgan. Can you pull this apart?
Yeah, I think for a long time, people have written in Giordano as the Norris favorite right now, but I think guys like Burns and Yossi are kind of creeping up there a little bit, and Riley, to me, is one guy to watch because, while he's got that forward group in front of him, he doesn't play with as good of a defensive group around him as a lot of these other guys do, right? So he's got to be more responsible defensively and offensively.
Do you know who leads the league in plus minus?
I would probably say Hainsey, just because it's hilarious to say.
He does. He does. By a good margin, too. Like plus 5.
No doubt about that.
That's a few games worth of plus minus.
Morgan Riley's averaging a little under 23 minutes a game right now, and some of the other guys are sitting at 24, 25. So it's not that big of a difference to where you're like, all right, he's not playing significant enough minutes in my book. But Morgan Riley has just been fantastic to watch this year, considering that he hasn't had a superb defensive partner like a lot of these other guys have.
That's true.
So
that is a great point. My thought, Morgan Riley won't win the Norris, and if he was on another team, he would. But I wonder if there's something about a player from Toronto, like people don't want him to win that award. There is some sort of stigma about writers from outside of Toronto voting for a Toronto team. I don't know. There's maybe something about it where people don't want to vote for him for it. I think you could see it, but let's go number 2. Who's your number 2?
Number 2. Oh, okay, I get to go 2 in a row here. Well, my number 2 is going to be Leon Draisaitl.
Okay, yeah, he's been ripping it up lately.
He has, and Yeah, I'm interested to see if he can unseat Ovi for that Rocket Richard trophy.
Yeah, 41 and Ovechkin's at 46.
Not too far behind, but last 15 games for Draisaitl, he's got 14 goals. So like we said, he's tearing it up. If he keeps up this pace, he could probably jump Ovi.
I mean, that would that's the pace Ovechkin needs to score 60.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to watch. I think, I don't think Edmonton's making the playoffs, so I think they're going to play a little loose. They're not going to play with any pressure to really get in. Like, we're going to see like we did last year where McDavid just turned up the point factor the last, 20 games like crazy. So, yeah, that probably will happen with Draisaitl and McDavid here.
McDavid could just, who knows what happened in the last minute here. I'll echo that. I'm not going to go Draisaitl because to me, I don't know. The Oilers, actually, funny enough, I'm going to watch. The Oilers play the Leafs next, so I'm going to watch the Oilers. Okay. Ironically, even though I don't really go out of my way to watch them, they're 7 points out of the playoffs. They're done. Originally, my thought was get Patrick Kane on this list because he's in a pretty similar boat. He's got 40 goals, just behind Draisaitl, and he's really the only one who's anywhere close to Kucherov in terms of the point total. But the fact that I'm already looking at the Lightning going, all right, are you going to break some record here, like for wins? Because that would be, that'd be pretty crazy. So I think in order to do that, you're watching Kucherov. I'm wondering in these last, 15, 16 games, does Kucherov end up with 130 points? Could he hit 130? I mean,
it's possible.
It would be tough. 24 points. He'd need to, be averaging about 1.5 points a game here.
I hope he does for my fantasy playoff
perspective. He very well could. I mean, he's right there. I think he's on pace for it. And so for a guy to get 130 points, it would be the first time that's happened since 96 or something like that. So it's been a good while. So I will be rooting for him personally, although I would much rather see that than the Lightning beat that record because, I don't know. I don't necessarily care about that record that much. It doesn't really, as a Leafs fan, it does nothing. It's interesting as somebody who just likes the game in general, but I also like when, they're going to have to beat some teams who are probably fighting for the playoffs, and so that's going to throw a wrench in all that. So we'll see. I think it'll be tough. These last 15 games are going to be tough because are you really going to keep the throttle on this whole time with another month and a half left to go in the season? Are you going to be able to keep your foot down on the accelerator this whole time and then go into the playoffs and expect that you're just going to do the same through the whole thing? Or are you going to rest anyone? Are you going to play certain players less and maybe increase the ice time of some lesser guys? That'll be interesting to see. But it certainly looks like they'll just let this go. They'll keep playing the way that they're playing, and they're not going to worry about being tired or anything like that because it really doesn't look like they're tired. Well, at least we haven't heard Andre Vasilevsky tell us he's tired yet.
That's true.
Who's your number one? Who are you going to be watching the most?
Well, I did say I had two goalies on this list, so my second goaltender is Mr. Binghamton out of St. Louis. Yes.
Interesting number one choice.
It really is because I want to see him go on a tear these last 15-ish games to unseat Pedersen for the Calder Trophy.
Oh, that's an interesting
and it's a
dynamic
tough
because he would lead his team to the playoffs.
Yes,
which is far more meaningful than anything that Pedersen has done.
Absolutely, and I was listening to XM on the way home, NHL Network, and they said that most writers that vote for these trophies really focus in on the last 6 weeks of the season. So if you look at that, Pedersen really not doing much. His team's probably not going to make the playoffs. And I think Binghamton, really, Jordan has been the reason St. Louis is even in the conversation right now. I think more than, Tarasenko catching fire and, Ryan O'Reilly playing well. I think he's been the reason.
Yeah, I mean, that was the whole reason they were struggling so bad is because Jake Allen was playing so terrible.
Yeah, and of goalies that have played 20 or more games this season, he's fourth most in shutouts, right? He's number 2 in save percentage behind Vasilevsky, and he's number 1 in goals against, which is freaking unreal. You imagine you stretch that out over the course of 60 games the whole season, his numbers would be off the chart. Now, do I think he could keep it up for 60 games? No, probably not. But
how many games has he played?
He's played 22.
22.
Yeah, so he's 16-3-0-1. So,
you know who else
pretty
went
dang
on a really hot streak one time? This guy, his name is Jim Carrey.
Jim
He
Carrey?
won the Vezina in
For
1985. Yes. And
I remember that.
he won the Vezina and then just vanished.
He really did.
I want to see somebody do some like cool piece on Jim Carrey.
Ooh.
He's like the least talked about Vezina Trophy winner ever. Because he won it in the lockout year. So there was only 48 games that year. So he just happened to get hot for basically what was half a season.
That's true.
And then vanished. Truly vanished. Like he eventually,
and then
I think 2
Kolzig
years
came
later,
in
he
and-
went to the Boston Bruins, and then 1 year there, and he was just
Well, Boston was terrible back then.
tinked around, and because they would get the number one pick with Thornton.
There, yeah. But like I look at all the other goaltenders right at the top of those statistical charts, and a lot of those goaltenders outside of Vasilevsky have like they have two guys up there, right? So you look at Robin Lehner and Thomas Greiss, Ben Bishop, and Khudobin, Halak, and Rask. So there's a lot of like combos up there. So there's not a ton of guys outside of maybe Fleury and Vasilevsky who have been playing so hot, and he's been the reason the team's been getting where they were. So he might get some Calder nods that way.
All right,
Your number one.
my number one, kind of off the board a little bit, but I am looking at the Columbus Blue Jackets again. I'm looking just at their top line. I'm very it's crazy to have so many UFAs on a team that should be better than they are. There's just been inner turmoil all year, but I'm looking at Panarin, Duchesne, Dzingel, Bobrovsky. I want to see what these individual players can do, even if they miss the playoffs. I think that this. Well, if they miss the playoffs, I think maybe all these guys are going to lose money. Like there is money involved here, because if they miss the playoffs, then they don't have the opportunity to get that playoff bump. There's always those guys. I mean, teams I think have settled down a little bit. You get a guy who's a guy for Chicago who had a crazy playoff, and they signed him to that big deal, and then he just
Brandon Saad.
No, not Brandon. No, I can't think of his name. He eventually got traded to the Carolina Hurricanes.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Why can't I think of the name either?
Anyway, so it happens where players have a nice playoff, and then teams pay them based off that playoff, and then it really, over the course of 82 games the next year, it doesn't work out, and they're not the same the next year in the playoffs. I think there is some who would have to say, all right, Duchesne, you've always wanted to be on a good team. Here's your chance to perform. And if he can't perform in the regular season here, then you got to think twice as a team that's talented and would want to bring this guy in. Is he a guy who can perform in the clutch, or is he just someone who has had a really nice season for a really bad team, and that's kind of been the story of his career? Panarin's a little bit different, but because he has performed in the playoffs in the past. But I do think that a big run here by the Columbus Blue Jackets, if they can grab this and run into the playoffs, figure it out, go on a nice little rip and get in the playoffs, win a round, maybe two, be the team that they kind of expect themselves to be. I could see the Blue Jackets making it in the playoffs. They could beat Washington.
Absolutely.
The first round. No problem, but they could beat Washington. They almost did last year.
Yeah, Bobrovsky gets it together, and
sure.
Yeah.
And you get into the second round, and suddenly you're looking at maybe the Islanders or Carolina. You could beat one of those teams, and you find yourself playing the Tampa Bay Lightning and you lose. But still, that's
you could tip your cap to that.
And hey, there's been amazing teams that lose in the playoffs. We were talking about it. The Red Wings had the record for wins. That team was unreal, and they still lost. The Dallas Stars in 2000 that lost to the New Jersey Devils in the Stanley Cup Finals, that team was amazing. They just got stifled. That New Jersey team was so freaking annoying to watch because they just stifled everybody.
New Jersey's done that a few times. Yes. I remember against Anaheim in the playoffs, they did that.
Certainly.
Gosh.
So there have been really good teams who lose, but I do think that if they can get in, they could find themselves in the conference finals. If
their route that way and through the Metro, yeah, absolutely. That's another reason why too that I hate the current playoff format. Don't get me wrong, I love seeing that matchup in the first round with Boston or Toronto. It's fantastic, which is great. But once you get past, I wish they would reseed all that stuff, you know.
Yeah, like they used to. See, if this were now Toronto, Tampa, Boston, Toronto, top 3 in the conference. Now that obviously, even before the old playoff system, Tampa would be 1, and then you'd have the 3 divisions or whatever, right? And so Tampa would be 1, and then Washington would be another one, and then whoever made up the other division would be the 3 seed, and then the 4 is essentially where you have your wild cards.
Right.
Now, if we just seeded them 1 through 8, Tampa would play Montreal, Boston would play Pittsburgh, Toronto would play Carolina, Washington would play New York. But there does need to be a reward for winning your division, so let's bump Washington up to the 2 and knock everybody else down. So then Tampa's playing Montreal, Washington would play Pittsburgh, Boston would play Carolina, and Toronto would play the Islanders.
Interesting.
And all those scenarios makes a lot more sense, and you get a true better team against a lesser team. But in the first round, you're going to get 2 of your top 3 teams in the conference that play each other.
Yep.
And same thing in the West. I mean, there's some, in the second round, again, you're going to get the 2 best teams in the West playing each other in the second round. So, all right. Well, that is our show for today. We let us know who you are going to be watching most, players and teams. Tweet at us at OT Hockey Talk. And we trust that in the last it's not even a quarter, it's like a fifth of the season, that you will throw on some extra games. If you don't have NHL Center Ice, just go on Reddit, go to NHL Streams, and watch the games for free.
That's true. I do love that.
You can do that. I pay for it because I don't like dealing with the crap.
All the ads.
But yeah, no, it's there are ways to watch games. So mute the TV when it's NBC Sports, so you don't have to listen to Mike Emmerich, and
ooh, ouch.
Maybe just, I don't know, grab a radio or something. All right, that's been our show. We hope you guys have a great week.